Strait of Hormuz Siege. Is this the start of World War? What if today's crisis is actually repeating history? From the oil shocks of the 1970s to rising tensions in 2026, the world may be closer to a major turning point than we think. Now watch the video.
So, right now we're all watching this US-Iran conflict that's choking oil production in 2026. But what if I told you we've seen this exact movie before? Believe it or not, the infamous oil crises of the 1970s offer a striking parallel, showing how tensions in a distant desert can push the whole world to the edge of an economic abyss. So let's start with a big question here. What if a crisis from 50 years ago is more than just a dusty chapter in a history book? What if it's actually a blueprint for what's happening right now? We're going to step away from the daily headlines for a bit and look at our present through history's mirror. Okay, so look at this. On one side, you've got the 1970s, defined by an oil embargo and a revolution. On the other, our current mess in 2026, all centered on the Strait of Hormuz. It's wild. It feels like history isn't just repeating itself. It's rhyming with this haunting, almost poetic precision. So let's dive in. All right, first up, the geopolitical sparks. To really get what's going on, we have to look past the price at the pump. See, these crises, they're rarely just about oil. More often than not, they're proxy fights for these deeper, long-simmering grudges. So, back in the 70s, the whole thing basically kicked off with two major bombshells. First, in 1973, you have the Yom Kippur War. The U.S. aided Israel, and in response, Arab OPEC nations hit back hard. They turned oil into a weapon with a full-blown embargo. Then, just a few years later, 1979 rolls around, and the Iranian Revolution overthrows a U.S.-backed leader, causing total chaos and a sudden halt to Iranian oil exports. Now, let's jump to 2026. We're seeing a chilling replay, aren't we? Tensions that have been bubbling under the surface for years have finally boiled over, with Iran disrupting the Strait of Hormuz, that tiny, critical choke point through which a fifth of the world's oil flows. I mean, the parallels are just stark. Both eras feature Middle Eastern powers using oil as leverage against what they see as Western aggression. But what were the ideas driving these actions? In the 70s, the embargo was fueled by a powerful wave of Arab nationalism and a growing backlash against Western influence. And of course, layered on top of all that was the Cold War, this constant fear that a weakened West could just open the door for communism to spread. Fast forward to 2026, and the ideological playbook has shifted. Iran's actions today stem from a mix of Shia nationalism, deep-seated anti-US sentiment, and, frankly, a desperate response to crippling sanctions. And that great power fear, it's evolved too. It's no longer about communism, but the dread of a new authoritarian alliance between Iran, Russia, and China, threatening to undermine global democracy. So, with the political stage set, now we can turn to the economic fallout. Let's examine exactly how these crises managed to literally choke the global economy by strangling the oil supply. To really wrap your head around the scale of the current crisis, just look at this number. 21 million barrels of oil every single day. That's what passes through the Strait of Hormuz. This one little geographic pinch point can, and I'm not exaggerating, quite literally strangle the world economy. Now, the methods of disruption have definitely evolved. In the 1970s, the strategy was pretty blunt. OPEC nations simply cut production and banned exports. But in 2026, the approach is way more insidious. We're seeing a form of hybrid warfare, less about official declarations and more about creating chaos through deniable actions like mining parts of the strait, attacking tankers with drones, and launching cyber attacks on pipelines. It's cheaper, harder to counter, and just as effective at creating panic. And the economic result? Well, look at this price shock. Before the 1973 crisis, oil was about $3 a barrel. Afterwards, it quadrupled to 12. The panic in the market just amplified the actual supply cut, leading to hoarding, speculation, and this massive price spike. Now, fast forward to 2026. The story is the same, just with much bigger numbers. A disruption in the Strait of Hormuz sends prices spiking from $70 to $120 a barrel in a matter of weeks. And here's the crucial takeaway. Despite 5 decades of incredible change, our fundamental vulnerability to this kind of shock remains frighteningly similar. These price shocks aren't just abstract numbers on a chart, They have a profound human and economic cost, rippling from global markets right down to individual families. Let's look at the fallout side by side. In the 70s, the key economic fear was stagflation, that toxic mix of high inflation and stagnant growth, with inflation hitting a painful 11 to 13%. The defining image, of course, was the endless line at the gas pump. In 2026, the fear is a global recession fueled by a bursting debt bubble, with inflation climbing to 4–5% and derailing economic recovery. And today's symbol? Those fragile, just-in-time supply chains grinding to a halt. But let's go beyond the statistics for a minute. In the 1970s, you had suburban mothers turning their station wagons into lifelines, just waiting in endless lines for gas. At the same time, auto workers in Detroit, where the car was king, suddenly found themselves laid off as demand for those gas guzzlers just collapsed. This was a crisis felt right at the kitchen table. And in 2026, the stories, they just echo, hauntingly. It's truckers in Texas watching fuel costs eat away their entire livelihood. It's farmers in the Midwest rationing diesel for their equipment, worrying if they'll even be able to bring in the harvest. It's a single parent skipping groceries to fill the tank. When oil flows get choked, it's not abstract markets that suffer first. It's people. You know, the story isn't only one of vulnerability. The 1970s didn't just leave scars. They actually planted some really important seeds. So let's look at the policy responses that were born directly from that crisis. Panic was pretty much turned into purpose. The U.S. created the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, a massive underground stockpile to buffer future shocks. It imposed CAFE standards, forcing cars to become more fuel efficient. It established the Department of Energy and helped form the International Energy Agency to coordinate among all the consuming nations. These were lasting, institutional changes. But maybe the single biggest lesson learned was this one word: diversification. The 1970s crises taught the world that relying too much on one region for energy was a critical vulnerability. That spurred the development of new oil fields in places like Alaska and the North Sea, and it was the first real push toward renewables and efficiency. That lesson is more relevant today than ever. The echoes of these energy crises should absolutely linger. They're a stark reminder of just how fragile our global systems are. But history also teaches us that these shocks can be catalysts for incredible change, forcing us to diversify, to innovate, and to cooperate. And that leaves us with one final thought. The question isn't if another disruption will come, but whether we'll have learned enough from the past to be ready when it does.
Thanks for watching. Like, comments, and share.